Hello everybody, and welcome back to another market analysis for the month of November. There has been a lot going on in the Runescape economy over the last couple of weeks, so I thought it was about time I make another update. So some of the major topics I'm going to be talking about is the pretty substantial market crash that happened about a week ago now. We're going to talk about a range of possible factors that could have affected it, and just the general market downturn as a whole. And more specifically, we're going to look at content like the Remnant Cave Nerf, Trailblazer League, gold farming, stuff like that, as well as anything else I think was interesting in the RuneScape market this month. Anyway guys, I hope you enjoyed the video. If you do, I always appreciate it. If you leave it a like, always helps out with the YouTube algorithm. Thank you so much, and let's get started. Now in general, there has been a lot of downward pressure on the market recently. As you can see, most items have been slowly losing value over the last quarter, if not longer. However, this month in particular, we have seen a pretty substantial market crash just over a couple of days. Now this occurred pretty much right when the league's Trailblazer update dropped, so there's definitely a pretty strong connection between the two. Looking at the Twisted Bow, went from around 1140 down to 1110, so a 30 mil drop just in a day or two, which is extremely quick. But of course that wasn't just a fluke. Across the board, a lot of items lost value on that day. For example, here we have the Ancestral Robe Top going from around 70 mil down to 64 mil just in a single day. Again, it has recovered a bit, but not up to the levels that it was at before. The Bandos Chestplate, a very similar trend, going from 19 mil down to 17 mil, recovering a little bit. Across the board though, we're seeing a very similar trend. On October 28th, the overall market lost about 5 to 10% of its value. Armadyl Godsword losing about 10% in value just on one day. The Armadyl Chestplate, pretty much the same thing. So I think it's pretty safe to assume that the main root cause of the general market crash on that date was the release of Trailblazer. Now that is somewhat understandable. For one, the demand for these items is just going to straight up be less if people aren't playing the game. No one is going to be using a Twisted Bow for a couple of weeks if they're just playing Trailblazer, and a similar thing for the rest of these items. However, another pretty strong additional reason is that players actually want to be able to afford bonds for a second account as well. Yesterday, on Sunday, we broke new records for having the highest player counts in OSRS history, which means we're gaining a lot of new players, but also a lot of new alt accounts to play Trailblazer. I think there's probably a pretty substantial amount of those. So a lot of people selling off their items to buy gold, pretty understandable. So that is what I believe caused the market crash, although obviously there's going to be a bit of panic selling in here as well, which is why I think it dropped 10% but then recovered about half of what it lost. The good news though for people who are worried about their bank value is that this is a temporary game mode. At most it can go on for 2 months, although I'm certain the majority of players will probably lose interest after the first month if not sooner. So while it may be a very good time to stock up on some items you've always wanted, in my opinion it is not a great time to sell off all of your items because you're worried about it falling further. Okay, so now I want to move over to the Revenant Cave Nerf, which has had a big impact on the economy as a whole. Some items are shooting up in price, some items are crashing downwards. So this could be an additional reason why items are crashing. Now the Revenant Cave Nerf happened about a week ago now, and there's been a ton of cascading effects on a ton of different items. Now I already touched on the wilderness weapons yesterday with my investment video, but as you might imagine, as the Revenant Caves are much less profitable, much less desirable, the unique weapons have been shooting up in price a lot, doubling in value this month alone. Similar thing with the Vigorous Chain Maze, the Thamron Scepter literally nobody cares about still. Now obviously there are some direct effects from the nerf, but some more indirect ones. One big kind of indirect effect that a lot of people are talking about is the fact that gold farmers have been displaced into different areas. Previously, revenants were a very desirable, low requirement moneymaker for gold farmers and bots. However, now that's not nearly as viable anymore, so they are going to places like the Nightmare, Zulrah, the Gauntlet. Places like that are going to be even busier than they were before. The Nightmare in particular seems to be a popular new place. Now we can kind of judge how popular the Nightmare is just based on a couple of items here. The Abyssal Bludgeon and the Saradomin Godsword are extremely popular weapons to use there. The Bludgeon being the third best in slot, but also like 10 times cheaper than any of the better options, so a lot of people opt for the Bludgeon. we can see that this month the bludgeon has been all over the place, and a very similar trend with the Seradoom and Godsword, actually pretty much identical. However, in general, this is causing more price crashes. For example, the Toxic Blowpipe going from around 4 mil at the beginning of the month down to 3 mil. That's a very substantial decrease on one of the best weapons in the game. The Uncut Onyx is another pretty significant decrease, going from 1.9 mil down to 1.5 mil. This is the cheapest I can ever remember an Onyx being, which of course means Amulets of Fury are going to become cheaper. That even has a collateral effect on Chaos Runes. Those are down to 50 GP each, the cheapest I've seen those pretty much ever. Even the Blade of Saldor is down around 10 mil this month alone. Now all of these price crashes are just kind of exacerbated by the fact that there just really isn't any new content for old school RuneScape this year, and specifically not that much new PVM content. There hasn't been any raid, PVM boss, slayer, whatever, which is fine. I think it's good that we've had variety this year, but the demand for PVM supplies is obviously a lot lower, so there really just is not enough demand to offset all of the people farming these items, whether gold farmers, legitimate players, or bots. If we look on the resource item end, we have raw sharks, which are at one of the cheapest points I've ever seen them ever, down to 450 GP for a raw shark. That's really cheap. Even red Chinchampas are nearly under 1000 GP each, so range training is getting pretty cheap now. So there's still a ton of bots, a ton of gold farmers playing the main game, but right now everyone is playing Trailblazer, which means there's nobody to buy those items, so pretty much everything is just tanking more than it already was. So I don't really expect these items to drop too much further, but until we get some new content in the main game that is making these items more relevant again, I don't expect them to go back up to where they were a year ago anytime soon. Now next up here, I want to move on to a couple individual items that I have found really fascinating this month. Probably the item with the craziest pricing history over the last month or two is gotta be the Granite Mall. Now I have not really been paying attention to the Granite Mall that much over the last, I don't know, year really. But the last I remember it was a bit above ALC price. For a good portion of old school RuneScape's history, Granite Malls were actually an ALCable item. People could actually break even ALCing this item, but no longer. Now with the addition of the ornate mall handle, Granite Malls actually did start leaving the game. But it wasn't until a recent change that caused the Granite Mall to go kind of crazy. At the beginning of October it was 100k, and at the end of October it was 300k. That is a 300% increase in just a single month, and from where it was at the beginning of the year, that is nearly a 10 times increase, which is massive. Now the update that I think caused this massive increase in price just this month is when Jagex moved the Ornate Mall handle from Bounty Hunter to Last Man Standing. Now after they moved the Ornate Mall handle to Last Man Standing, the price obviously increased because there was less people farming it. The interesting thing though is there is somewhat of a hard cap on how expensive it can get because it's locked to a point system, which means it's kind of locked roughly around this price, which means the rest of that price increase has slowly been passed on to the Granite Mall, causing it to increase in price substantially. That is of course until like today where it's dropped by about 150k. That is kind of crazy, I don't know why that happened. Now another really big impact of the Trailblazer League is on bonds themselves. Now bonds have been increasing in price for months now, pretty much since March or April. Now someone correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure this is maybe the most expensive bond we've ever had. I went and checked in game and it was about 6.5 mil. There might be a few fringe cases where it went up more, but considering we're just barely into November and often bonds continue to raise up all the way until December, I think this year is going to be the most expensive year for bonds ever, which happens like every year, so that's not really much of a prediction, but still kind of worth mentioning. Actually, it's kind of impressive how predictable this increase has been over the last 3 months. It's pretty much increased a very similar percent every week, like clockwork, following a very similar weekly trend. The only thing we don't know is when it's going to stop. Anyway guys, that is going to be it for this market analysis. I hope you enjoyed it. If you have any questions or any other things you want to discuss, leave a comment down below. I always try to read them all. Now before I go here, I want to give a massive thank you to Revolver Ocelot, Kush Patel, Tizdoc Bunny, and Brad Sings for subscribing in my Dragon tier of YouTube membership. Can't believe you guys did that. Thank you so much guys, it means a lot. Also a massive shout out to Double Talk, Heathen OSRS, Base Titch, and Luke Kayser. Thank you guys again. If any of you guys are looking for an additional way to support the channel, becoming a YouTube member is an awesome way to do so. You can become immortalized in my videos, get access to a video release schedule, as well as get a custom Discord role. Anyway guys, thanks again, and I'll see you next time.